Questions about safety and background checks have dominated the conversation for some time now when it comes to ride sharing in Austin.
But today we learned it's another concern altogether that prompted two lawsuits against rideshare companies Fare and Get Me, two companies that stepped in when Uber and Lyft left.
KXAN's Kylie McGivern sat down with those who say in the midst of the change, the blind community has been largely ignored.
An individual who is blind or visually impaired is a prime customer to be able to use ride-sharing companies.
It's that customer base disability rights attorney Leah Davis says companies Get Me and Fare are leaving out to dry.
For me, I've had my visual impairment for more than 40 years.
Steve Elliott is an attorney himself, busy running from meeting to meeting across town when one day he says the Get Me app brought him to a screeching halt. It all has to do with what's called text-to-speech software.
I'm using the keyboard.
W-A-S-S.
Hearing the letters helps Steve know he's going to the right spot.
Home slice pizza. Button. Double tap to edit your destination.
Fasten is an example of an app that now works for the local blind community after responding to attorneys' concerns.
Now, if I hit that button, I'll request a ride. But you wouldn't be able to do that in the other app.
So you would get to that point on the other apps, but you couldn't request it.
That's
so
right.
You're out of luck.
That's right.
Elliott explained that Apple and Google have accessibility guidelines for app developers to help assure their success, and ultimately, people like Steve's success.
Really, when we don't have transportation infrastructure, we don't have good public transportation, when we're not considering people with disabilities, it has a significant impact on our independence.
Fare says it released a new app just last weekend that addresses most of the concerns. Get Me told us it's not violating the Americans with Disabilities Act, but it is still working on adding accessibility features that should be available sometime next year. Now, reading through the city's code, we found that ride-sharing companies must turn over accessibility plans within 6 months of operating. But this only addresses riders who use a support animal or a wheelchair, for example. It does not mention anything specifically about blind customers' ability to even request a ride through apps, something Elliott feels should become part of city council conversations moving forward.
Kylie, thank you. The city does require ride-sharing companies to follow a list of requirements, and that includes getting fingerprint background checks for drivers. City officials tell us right now all of the local companies are in compliance with the city's regulations. That means 50% of their drivers have undergone fingerprint background checks. The next goal is to have 85% of their drivers at compliance. That deadline is December the 1st. And by February 1st, companies must be 99% compliant.